Okay, so hello and welcome everyone. Thank you so much for joining and for keeping on joining here to our third Talking Research meetup, this time an online version. So my name is Sigal, I'm a UX researcher at Autodesk, and we also have Owen here. We're both hosting this meetup, and I'm very excited to see all of you here from so many different places and companies. All want to hear more about research repositories. Definitely an interesting topic. Like I said, we had two meetups before. The first meetup was in the summer. It was kind of a hybrid in-person and also online, so you can check the recordings. The first one is kind of taking you to the journey of user research, and it was on starting your user research in a new company and kind of buying in from other people. The second one was about creating roadmaps, making more impact, and doing the right research in the company. And now we're here talking about research repositories. We're kind of in the stage of we have research, but we want to make sure that our insights are actually implemented, used, that they last longer, that they're searchable. And it's really a challenge for a lot of researchers and people who do research. We hear it all the time. And it's something that is also kind of a challenge for us. And we've been discussing recently. So that's actually how the meetup kind of came to happen. And like I said before, and so many people asked, you can see this meetup is recorded, so don't worry, you'll get it all after it. We'll send it in the mail, and we'll also send the slides, so don't worry about that. And we'll have plenty of time, hopefully, for Q&A. So if you have questions, don't hesitate, let us know, write in the chat, or just ask them later, and we'll get to them. And before I give it to Oren to introduce our speaker, just feel free to write in the chat where you're from, where you're working, so we'll get to know everyone. And now, Oren, to you.
Thanks, Sigal. So hi, everyone. I'm Oren. I'm a UX researcher at JFrog, which is a DevOps platform company. And I'm especially excited to welcome Tomer here because it has some personal meaning to me. So about 9 to 10 years ago, I made my first steps into the UX research and industry world. And Tomer was one of my first contacts in UX researcher in industry. And he also was my sponsor when I interviewed for Google in New York. It was like far away and far in time. And fast forward to 2023, and now we're both in the same field, and I get to host him along with Sigal to the meetup that we're organizing. So it's really like a full circle for me. So let's hear a bit about Tomer for those who don't know him that well. So Tomer is a leading voice on design thinking, user experience, and lean research methodology. One of the, I think, most experienced user experience researchers that I know, at least. And he's currently the co-founder and chief experience officer at Anywell, which is a startup on a mission to facilitate hybrid work. And before this position, he's held senior UX research positions at Goldman Sachs, WeWork, and Google. He's the author of 3 books on UX researcher. He has mentored organizations on user research methodology, has given keynotes, taught workshops in 13 countries and the United Nations. He holds a master's degree in human factors in information design from Bentley University in Massachusetts. And a part of all of this, Tomer is a really nice and down-to-earth person, as you'll see in a minute. So thank you, Tomer, for joining us and supporting our young community. I'll hand it to you now.
All right. Thank you very much. I appreciate it. Thank you, Sigal. Thank you, Oren, for inviting me. I'm talking to you from my basement in New Jersey. Basement because there's a lot of noise upstairs today, so I ran away to the basement. And today we're going to talk about research repositories. So let me share my screen first. Give me a thumbs up when we are able to see. Yes, okay. All right. Got everything open up. Just give me a second. Okay. All right. So when I think about this topic, I first, oh, yes, I first ask myself this question. How does your company decide what to work on? And the answer to this question is sometimes complicated, sometimes it's very straightforward. I use this old diagram that we created at WeWork at the time. I think you decide based on three things: based on passion, what you want to do; based on ability, what you and your team can do; and based on user needs, which is external to your company. In my opinion, you have to have all three aspects, because if you only have two, and these are these arrows that you see outside of the diagram, if it's only passion and ability, it's just art. If it's only passion and need, it's fantasy without the work. And if it's ability and need, then it's just work. It's not nothing that you want to do really. So today I want to focus more on the need area, on the user needs area. And when we talk about research repositories, because I think this is the primary issue there. All right. And as I always start with a problem or the problem definition, or the problems that I noticed, at least when this idea came to mind several years ago. I must admit that it was in my mind during the Google days, which was many years ago. And at Google at the time, I have no idea how it is today, but at Google at the time, if you wanted to do something or kind of pitch something, there was no one person you could go to, persuade them, and then it would happen. You had to persuade a lot of people. And I just failed in persuading a lot of people that this idea of a repository is something we should chase. Gave up, and only when I left Google and moved to WeWork, I was able, together with my team there, I was able to make that happen and kind of expand on that in other companies that I worked for later on. But I want to go back to the problems. So there's several problems that I'm sure if you did research for more than 15 minutes, then you'll probably nod your head in agreement. So the first one is bad research memory. As organizations, we all have bad research memories. Why is that? It's because we created a system, or a traditional system, where researchers or others do their research, write reports, and then store them somewhere. And then once somebody, usually the example I like to give is somebody important is asking, what do we know about how our users do something? Then if there was no dedicated study to answer that specific question, the researcher or the person who is asked that question is going on a fishing expedition. They start seeking information, some sense of information that would help them answer that question. As we all know in research, in any given research study, and I'm sure you know it if you did it at least once or twice, you come in with your research questions. If the research study is successful, you have answers to those questions, but you also have questions or collect or gather or find answers to questions that nobody asked. And this is not the title of the report, but these are sometimes lost, and you need to scan through a lot of reports to do that. And in many cases, you don't even have access to those reports if the organization is big. You don't even know of these other studies because it might be in a different department, different country, different team, and you just do the research again. So we have very bad research memory as organizations. The other problem is the research silos. So you mentioned people who do research. There are many people who do research in an organization, whether we call it that way, whether we like it or not. Whether they're qualified to do that or not, it doesn't really matter. A lot of people, a lot of teams are doing research. So UX research is doing research, but also, marketing is doing market research. You would argue that salespeople learn a ton of things. You would argue that your tech support or your call center learns a lot of things about users. And product managers, sometimes they're asked, it's a part of their job to talk with users. So in many cases, there are multiple people and departments who are doing research. Everybody's happy to share their reports, but usually research happens in silos. We don't really know about the research. We don't really have an opportunity to collaborate or even say, hey, that research question that you're after is something we answered a couple months ago, so you don't need to do your research. So there are a lot of research silos and a lot of repetition that's happening because of that. And then somehow we as an industry decided that a long time ago, probably, that reports is the way to communicate research, but in many cases, those reports, whether physical or digital, they collect dust on their shelves, and a lot of people, pay attention when the report is first communicated, but then forget about it and definitely forget where it is. The last problem, I think it's the bigger problem of all, is the ambiguity of customer knowledge. There's knowledge that we gather in an organization about our customers, but it's not really clear what we're supposed to do with it. Yeah, there are answers to questions, that's good, but there's no kind of overall evaluation of what is it that we know and what we should do about it as a business, not as a team who's looking to improve a specific product or specific feature, but as a business, what is it that we're supposed to do with this customer knowledge? And this is where it connects to what I started with in terms of user needs. We'll talk about it later on. So in my opinion, the solution is not necessarily a research repository. The term I came up with a couple of years ago, or a few years ago when we first started it, is not even a repository. Somebody else coined that. To me, the solution is a research system, and a repository is a part of that. So what I'm going to go through very quickly now are the primary components of that system. So the first one is a repository. And then these are two, I would call them approaches. And this is what I came up with at the time, atomic research and continuous research. So what I want to do now is just go through some definitions, because I'm throwing out a lot of kind of words, and I want to explain what I mean by that very quickly. So a research repository, the definition I like most is by Dovetail, actually. They called it a Wikipedia for customer knowledge. And it's true. It's a one-stop shop, if you will, for all the knowledge that we have about our users or potential users. It's not necessarily customers. It's not necessarily users. It could be potential ones as well. So that's a research repository. We'll go to the details very soon, I promise. Atomic research is an approach to managing research knowledge that redefines the atomic unit of a research insight. If until that, the atomic unit was a research report, this approach is now introducing the nugget, or the research nugget, as I like to call it, as the atomic unit. And the way I define a nugget is a tagged observation supported by evidence. And I'm going to go over the three components: observation, evidence, and tagging in a minute. But before that, I want to briefly go over what makes a good nugget. So a nugget could also, I also use interchangeably the word insight. A nugget, a good nugget is one that has high quality evidence. And to me, the best evidence is video. There's nothing, to me, the currency of user research is a video of a user doing something or saying something. There's nothing more powerful than for a stakeholder than watching a video of a user succeeding in doing something, failing or struggling in doing something with your product, or saying something about you as a brand that's more motivating for you to take action. Second component is that it's well articulated. I don't know if everybody knows the terms kind of good participants. Good research participants are ones, and I'm sure you've bumped into a few of these, ones that are very well articulated. They speak very clearly about what's going on with them, what they're thinking, what's happening. And the best videos and the best nuggets are ones that have these participants that are so well articulated. Third is that it describes a single experience. A nugget is a single experience. It's not a report with a collection of a lot of findings. It's just one thing. Okay, so it's very small. That's why I called it atomic. Sorry. The fourth one is that it answers the question why. So it's not just describing what happened, what you learned, but also why. Why is that important? Why is that a thing? Why we should pay attention? Why is it happening? And the last one, that it says something about your brand. You learn something about how your brand, your company, your product is being perceived by others external to the company. And these are the great nuggets. Now, the components of the nuggets, the three of them I mentioned: observation, evidence, and tagging. So observation is just words that you write to describe what is it that you learned and why that thing is important. It could be the behavior of the participant. It could be something that they said, but it's always something that you noticed that you think is important, related to, again, a single experience. And it also includes the why, the explanation of why this is meaningful. So that's the first component. Oops. The second component, yes, is actually evidence, not tags. Have a little bit of delay here on the slide transition, but evidence. So evidence, I mentioned earlier, again. And evidence, there you go. So evidence is, to me, it's a video. It's very short. It's not, in the observation, if you decided to quote the participant, then it's not necessarily the video with the quote. I would say in this case, your observation is wrong. You should put better effort in describing what you learned, not just a quote. But the evidence could be a video of a user, again, doing something, showing you something, saying something important. But it has to be proof for what you mentioned in the observation. And to me, this is mandatory, critical part of any insight is the evidence. It's not, a product manager or a researcher or an engineer or whoever saying, I thought this was important because blah, blah, blah. But here's evidence. Here is somebody actually going through something that you can show people and prove your point. I'm talking about video, but it could also be audio. We all know that not all participants are agreeing to be recorded through video, but I try to insist, but I also accept audio, and sometimes a picture is relevant or helpful and so on. But there has to be evidence. I would just say one thing, notes by somebody who watched a user session, just notes, is not evidence, okay? Evidence is direct, taken directly from the participant. So video, audio, photo. And the last one is tags, and I'll expand a little bit about that. When we add a nugget to a repository, I'm hopeful that in any system that does that, there's an opportunity to tag. This is very helpful when you come to pulling insights from the system, themes, what you learned, playlists, whatever we call it. But it's very critical in finding the information later on. To me, there are 5 components of an effective tagging taxonomy. later when I share the slide deck, you can click here to read a whole article I and some colleagues of mine wrote about that. Very briefly, 5 components: procedural tags. These are tags just saying, who was the researcher, when was the session recorded, what methodology we use. It's just stuff around what we learned. What two is the product tags. What is the product? If your company has multiple products or features, what is it? Then demographics about the participants, experience tags. It could be whether the experience, we call it the experience vector, whether it was positive or negative, and all kinds of other, frequency of how that happens and so on, what you observed is happening and so on and so forth. And if you have applied service design to your work, then I would say journeys are also a part of how you tag any nugget or any insight. I want to show something. So in my past, at least, I worked with 3 tools for repositories. So I'm going to show screenshots from all 3 tools. This is from Dovetail. This is I just collected all the tags that we had there. So each color represents one of these components that I just mentioned. And then each column here is a tag, and what you see in each column are the different values for the tag. And here is just an example, again, from Dovetail of how one nugget is tagged. So if you remember, yellow is procedural. So you see what I mean by procedural tags. Green is the product tag, blue is demographics, purple is experience-related tags, and red is service design tags. So this is my example for that. Moving on to, I think, the last definition, and I think this is key again, continuous research. Another thing that I think is critical for such a system. Continuous research is a fast rhythm research that is open-ended in nature. And I want to show what I mean. If in traditional research, let's imagine imaginary calendar of a researcher, okay? So each block here represents a research study. So this could be from start to finish. This could be a usability test, or field observations, or interviews, whatever it is. This is a normal schedule for a researcher. You don't always do research. Sometimes you plan it, but sometimes you do other things. But generally speaking, this is a relatively very productive research throughout the year. And that's how their calendar would look like. When we're talking about continuous research, it looks very different. Every day you do a session with the participant, a session or 2. It has very open-ended goals. We ask very open-ended questions. I can give you an example from WeWork that I actually apply until today. At WeWork, we knew about each WeWork member who decided to leave us. And we did some form of an exit interview with all of them. And we asked them during these interviews 3 questions. Why are you leaving? So not for persuading them to come back. We just really wanted to know why they're leaving. What worked well at WeWork and what didn't work so well. And so these are very open-ended questions. They decided what the answer is. If coffee was really important to them, they could talk about coffee for why they're leaving, or what went well, and so on and so forth. But the participants decided, and each day we collected information based on these interviews and added it to that system. So this is how it would look like. Changes things a little bit. There are 3, I call it 3 C's, but there are 3 ways a repository is being used. First, you create nuggets. Okay, so there's somebody or people, it could be mostly it's researchers who are creating content. So they are adding nuggets to the repository or adding nuggets to the system. I'm showing you some screenshots of, this is how you collect evidence or define evidence, and this is how you kind of write the observation and do some of the tagging. But the idea is that you are contributing content to that system. The second component could also be done by researchers, but not necessarily. Could be done by anyone in the company. Is curation. What do I mean by curation? After you conducted let's say an interview, and you, let's say, derived 5 nuggets from that interview, and you do that a lot, and you have a lot of nuggets in the system, let's say 1,000. Now you want to learn something. You see what you can learn about, going back to my example from before, what do we know about how our users do X? So I will be looking for X within the system, and I'll curate a list of nuggets relevant that are giving me answers to that question. What our users do with X, or how do they do something? So you curate a playlist, if you will, of nuggets where that fall under one topic. This is how it looked in Polaris, the system we developed at WeWork for atomic research, for a repository. So this is a playlist actually. On the right-hand side, you see all the nuggets, and you see the length of the playlist here and the topic and blah, blah, blah. And then you can just hit play and watch it. And this is the third component, the third C. And the third one is consuming. Okay, so whether you like to consume it or not, all, in my mind, all the people in the company are quote unquote eligible to consume insights from the system. They should have access to the system and should be able to consume specific nuggets or playlists of nuggets. So these are 3 things you could do with a research repository: create, curate, and consume. I just want to show you a little example, talk about a little bit of numbers, how consumption can help you understand what's important. So let's say, again, a WeWork example, let's say at the time to become a WeWork member, you needed to take a tour, physically, you take a tour in the building. And let's say you're looking for, I don't know, positive things that happened in tours in the system. So you might find a list of nuggets, and on the right-hand side, let's say WeWork offers coffee. We want some feedback about the coffee. So let's say you do these 2 searches in the system, and you see that you have 70, without even reading and curating anything. You just see that you get 72 results for positive things about the tour, and 3 results about, let's say, negative things about coffee. So without even reading and curating anything, immediately, and that's one thing that a repository can give you, what you should probably pay more attention to, just by the sheer number of insights that you have about any given topic. Of course, this is much more meaningful and kind of useful once you have, I would say, thousands of nuggets in the system. If you just started and did a study about the tour and you have 72 insights about a tour, of course you will. But if you have 10,000 nuggets about a lot of things, then 72 is a big number. You should pay attention to. All right. I want to show you a few screenshots from how I did that today in the startup that I'm working on. So I mentioned Dovetail and showed you some screenshots. I mentioned Polaris from WeWork and showed you some screenshots. I'm going to show you screenshots from a tool that is not dedicated to was not built for a research repository, although today there are dedicated tools for that. This is Monday.com that we kind of twisted its arms a little bit to do the work that we needed to do in terms of a research repository. So very briefly, on the left-hand side, this is the menu, kind of the navigation for the entire system. I'm just, before I'm going to talk about samples, I'm just going to mention some things here. We kind of created it from start to finish. So from initiation of research, we gather research questions our team has, the research project, all the screeners are here, all the participants are here, everything is documented in the system. And then when it comes to the repository of insights itself, we have samples, observations, news, themes, opportunities. I'll skip the orgs and reading. I'll explain briefly. Samples are the video recordings of the complete sessions. Okay, so what we do, we upload these to YouTube with limited access, obviously, public access. And then we add them here with some information. And then we have ones that are in progress, ready to process, and ones that are already processed. Somebody's having a party, if they can mute, thank you. And then from there, we have observation boards. I'm showing here kind of each row here is a nugget, okay? Here in the system, we call it an observation, but that is a nugget. And then it is connected to a sample. Remember the full recording of the session. And here we kind of integrated it with another app that allows us to clip that part of evidence. So if the video is 30 minutes, I can say here from minute 225 to 242 is the part that I want, and it automatically creates just a clip of that part. I don't need to do any editing. And when I click that link, I only see the content between 225 and 242. On the right-hand side, here are all the tags. So we do all the tagging here. Let's see, what else? What I called earlier playlists, and this is how we called it at WeWork, Polaris. Here we call it themes. These are collections of nuggets, and we tag them as well. And another nice thing that we kind of hacked our way into, on our Slack, we created a channel called Reading. And then everyone in the company who finds anything externally, any story, industry report, news, article, anything at all that is somehow related to what we do or should be related to what we do, and they put the link in that Slack channel for everybody to read, it is automatically added to this board here. And then we use it sometimes when we create those themes. We say, okay, we found these 20 nuggets to support what we're interested in, but we also have 3 news stories to back that up, in addition to what we learned from research directly. So, so that's that. I think that's it. Oh, one more thing. Okay, yeah. So the one component here that I didn't go over is this is the actual definition of each and every tag. So what we did here is created, and I'm just showing the emotion tag under experience tags. So we list all the emotions we want to tag by, define them, and then here you see all the nuggets that we used or tagged for each emotion. What just an anecdote why we tag by emotion. It allows you to do searches in the repository that would tell you very, very interesting, give you very, very interesting insights about your users. So I could, going back to WeWork, I could say, I could be interested in a question, what makes our WeWork members in the Netherlands angry? Okay, so I can search by anger, and then I could find that there are a lot of Dutch people annoyed by, let's say, our coffee. I don't know, whatever. So this is why we tag by emotions. Yeah, so this is the demo. I want to finish with kind of three kind of insights about research repositories. So first of all, how has research changed in the companies that I applied it in? And these were WeWork, and then Goldman Sachs, and right now Anywell. So first of all, continuous research is a thing. Okay, so it didn't completely replace, and it shouldn't completely replace the traditional research I showed you earlier with the calendars, but research kind of is now allocating some time to the continuous kind of format of doing things. Research is of higher quality because we make a point of understanding why. You know, when you write a report, there's no way for you to, or there is a way for you to not do some things, not write some things. Here, because we implement a rigorous kind of reviewing system and verification that nuggets are of high quality, then we make a point of understanding why, which is really important when somebody's trying to do something about those findings. Sometimes there's no need for new studies. It happens all the time where even people who are very much involved in contributing content to the repository, even they are sure when somebody comes to them and asks for a research study about something, they're sure that they don't have an answer to that question. Once you search, you find that you already have answers to a lot of questions, just by the fact that you're reorganizing and reformulating a collection of what you learned from the past in different studies. No reports, to me, that's a big change. And stakeholder training, guidance, and support is being given to teams who want to do research on their own. And sometimes we train people on even contributing content and nuggetizing, as we used to call it, and curating playlists or themes of research insights and nuggets, not only something that researchers do. How have stakeholders changed? So I've seen stakeholders use the system to affect product roadmaps, and this is kind of going back to the needs. I think this is what they learn most from it, and they see the value in it. I see that those that we trained are more involved in research. They want to do more of it. They want to learn more. They kind of become hooked on the repository and finding things there. And they nuggetize. They start to think the way researchers think and act like that. Once we trained them, of course, and gave them kind of the ability to do that through the system. They create the nuggets. They create the insights, which to me is a very positive change. And lastly, challenges. And there are probably more, but these are just 5 that kind of came to mind. Researchers are used to traditional ways. And sometimes the biggest kind of negative approach and things that are being said and thought about research repositories are coming from researchers who think that their job is now limited to creating nuggets. I think the job is not really changing. It's still identifying user needs, identifying how a business can do better. It's just this is a different approach and different tools to doing the same things. I think that there's a big challenge once you start of popularizing it and formalizing it within an organization. I know in all 3 companies that I did that, it's very, very hard still. People are not used to research in general, and they're definitely not used to this this kind of approach specifically, especially people who are far away from research that could benefit from it. privacy of participants. Use those videos. I can tell you about funny or not so funny things that happened at WeWork where a certain person who worked, or an employee, a WeWork employee who worked in a certain building, recognized somebody from a video and came to them and asked them, what did you say that about us, and blah, blah, blah. So there's still privacy challenges with that once you share videos with the entire company. Rotten nuggets. Sometimes insights become, we call them rotten, but they become irrelevant or just not true or very old. And if you don't do some maintenance all the time to kind of clean it up, then you have some rotten nuggets in the system. And quality is always an issue, especially when you have, you know, more than one person nuggetizing and curating, then you have differences of opinion and activities in the system. So it's always a challenge to create one standard for how to add high quality nuggets or playlists or themes. I want to finish with this kind of statement. I know it's long, but I'll read it slowly. The ideal research system implementation makes short customer video playlists illustrate experience phenomena that help teams understand what is working well in the experience, what experiences are negatively affecting the business, and what are opportunities for serving unmet customer needs. I think this is the key here, and this is why research repositories are enabling that and are important. So I'm going to leave you with that. I am going to thank you very much. And I think that the more interesting part is upcoming, where I'm happy to discuss all the questions that you have. One shameless plug before I do that, my current startup, if you're interested, check out all the details here. If you're working hybrid, then it's relevant for you. And these are some resources for you. The first one being a link to this slide deck. You can find it here. And I also point out a promo I have for my last book for recent book. So pay attention to that. All right, now I'll shut up. Sigal, how much time do we have for questions?
Like half an hour, which
Okay.
I hope is good. That we have tons of questions. This was so interesting, and we have great questions in the chat, and so many people who also answered and chimed in, which is great. But first of all, thank you so much for this amazing talk. It was really interesting. And we have a lot of questions. We'll try to go a bit to the questions that were asked in the beginning, so we won't meet them. There was a question that came up a couple of times, and it was also the second one. Nick, you asked about breaking silos. Do you want to explain more? You can join and tell us what your question was, if you
Not
want.
sure if anybody can hear me.
Great. Yes.
Oh, yeah. So wasn't expecting to talk, but this is awesome. This is very interesting. It's a very different take on a repository. But yeah, my question was, you know, you brought up silos as a problem, and especially when in a more mature organization where there is a lot of research, maybe someone coming in as a research operations professional to a again, mature organization, a lot of stuff. Different research teams, maybe specialties. Yeah, how do you really get buy-in to have a single source of truth? How do you reach out? How do you advocate for this one repository where others are really set in their ways? And that's something like set in their ways. That's something that we always try and break these habits. But how do you make sure that we advocate on our repository?
So there's a lot of legwork is the short answer. I remember at WeWork at the time, we identified probably 100 teams that could find it useful to use the repository. So we just emailed them, created playlists for them for their specific interests, and emailed to them that it was about consumption, about contribution, it's just a lot of legwork to kind of explain to people that, this could be beneficial for everybody. Sometimes these people didn't even know that we existed, didn't even know that we produced that content. So even if they didn't eventually contribute content to the system, and they just knew about us and we knew about them, and we exchanged information, that was beneficial. But the main goal was to have everybody with an insight to add it to the system. Not easy, but it's doable. A lot of legwork, and just accept the fact it's not going to work with everybody, especially in large organizations. But generally speaking, people are, they have good intentions and they want to share what they learn. And if we can help them put more eyes on what they learn, then they also see it as a good thing. So it's a lot of you need a lot of kind of PR skills and willingness to do a lot of legwork.
Would you say there's and sorry for if I hope sorry if I have a follow-up. What would you say is who can we reach out as advocates for this as well? Who would you recommend? Because again, repositories can be very much research focused or operations focused. Who would you see as advocates that we can lean on?
I would say if you can create first successes, then that's always good. So if there's a team that you trained on doing research and they started contributing and they did something about it and they're very happy with the system, have them be your ambassadors or some of your ambassadors, and help others see how this could be successful. And if you have resistance or conflicts because of that, then I would say just that's suggestion good for many areas, not just that, but just work with people who accept it more and less with people who don't. And those who don't will eventually see the success of other teams and will want to work with you.
All right. Well, thank you very much for answering. I'll shut up now and let someone else ask.
Cool.
Yeah. Let's go back still for a couple of questions that we had before. Yeah, so Isha, you're raising your hand and you also asked a question about something. So in the chat, so go ahead.
Yeah, thank you for that, Sigil. It's the same question. My question was that researching for creating a new product is different from research for an existing one. And what I mean by new product is the 0 to 1, which is more exploratory, requires a very different approach and a mindset. You may not even have a hypothesis in the beginning because you're still looking for a hypothesis. So do you differentiate between how you create repositories for the two?
I would say I'm mostly interested in, I think, there could be other opinions and I'm perfectly fine with them. I think I'll say the elimination first. I think research repositories are less for studies such as usability tests and more for studies that are more exploratory in nature. I think the shelf life of something you learned in a usability test is usually very short, which is the opposite of the shelf life of something that you learn about, let's say, the needs of your users or the identity of your user, who your users are. And therefore, I think a repository is much better for, you describe it very well, as from 0 to, when you're trying to come from, to reach from 0 to 1. I think this is mostly relevant for that. So I don't create different repositories for the two. I would just, I have a lot of other principles and approaches, but I don't think usability testing should be done by researchers necessarily. I think it should be done by engineers and product managers. But leaving that aside, I think a repository is mostly beneficial for exploratory type research.
Thank you for that. I really appreciate you bringing attention to the fact that user research is more than usability. I truly appreciate that. Thank you.
Cool. Thank you.
Yeah, it was a great point. Okay, I want to ask another question that a couple of people were actually asking in different ways. So I'll try to phrase it myself. because this was my question as well. So your examples, especially from Dovetail that you showed in the beginning, they look like a lot of work that need to be done very specifically and very thought through. And the question is, how scalable is it? Especially if not only researchers do research, and then we need to kind of rely on other people who will do it correctly and tag it correctly.
Okay, so what is the thing that was asked about that a lot of work? The taxonomy of tags? Or?
Yeah, just creating
Okay.
all of them. Not just creating the taxonomy, but using it.
Okay, so two things. Creating the taxonomy takes time. I agree. It takes kind of agreement, and if you do it wrong, then it's really hard to fix. Once you have 5,000 nuggets in the system already, or insights in the system already, saying, "Oh, you know what? This tag shouldn't be this; it should be that." And then you need to fix and change 5,000 nuggets backwards. I can tell you that my decision always is, if we have that change and you can't avoid these changes, we don't update back. We only update from that point on. So that's about that. And as for kind of doing the tagging, it's not. I think we measured that in the past. The work is not longer, and it's not harder than writing a traditional report. You may do different things, but it's not longer. And the more you do that, the faster you're able to do that. What we also did, and this is really, really important, and this is, depending on the tool, you can force it, is reviewing and evaluation. So there's always a second person or a second pair of eyes who are looking at whatever somebody nuggetized to make sure that it meets the standards and makes sense. Again, not to say that there couldn't be any mistakes, especially when people first try it out, but it's really, really critical that not just one person adds nuggets to the system, but there's a process of reviewing nuggets, especially for people who are just starting to do that.
That makes sense. And also maybe the fact that you don't do any research reports, but only these nuggets, then it means really that it's not too much work. I guess for people who are still going to keep their
not
reports.
less work. It's not less work.
Yeah, not more.
So,
probably not more, but definitely not less.
Do you ever do research on your research system to identify like the tags that you need to use, or what would be useful for stakeholders or usable for them?
Usually we do a meeting maybe once a month between all the people who contribute content, all the nuggetizers. And then there we kind of align on different things and different needs, different changes that we need to make. And so on and so forth. But kind of formal research on that, no. We need to focus on the product first.
Okay. Well, I want to go to the first question that we have because it was the first. And then Shane, you're raising your hand nicely, so you'll be next. So Lorenzo, I think, about what is considered evidence. Are you here? Do you want to ask the question?
Yeah, sure. So I was thinking if you also consider product feedback or feedback that was provided by users voluntarily as a source. And probably I would amplify the question by asking, what do you consider as source of information that could be used in the repository and for nuggets?
No, I don't want to limit anyone and anything. Anything that is a source that gives you information, knowledge about your customers or potential customers is valid. It could be tweets, it could be formal research, it could be somebody, let's say you present in in a trade show or something, and somebody came to your booth and you recorded it and they said something about the product. Sometimes you have product demos there. That and anything whatsoever that is a type of kind of learning about a product or a company, I would say it's valid. I don't think I would, I mentioned earlier, the only thing that comes to mind, because I've seen that before, that is invalid is notes somebody's taking. Notes
Okay.
is not evidence. But other than that, anything that's really showing you a certain behavior or opinion of a user about feature, product, company, whatever.
So just to follow up questions real short. So would you consider, for example, feedback from the field team or from internal colleagues that have observed something as valid? That's one. And the other question is, if you somehow in your research repository have a way of tagging or measure the confidence or the quality depending on the source and who obtained that information.
Second question, no, we didn't do that. But in the kind of review process, then you identify lower quality insights. And sorry, what was the first question?
Yeah, the question is if you consider the valid also the feedback that you gather from your colleagues internally, right? From field team, for example, customer success team.
I mean, everyone is entitled to their opinion, but I would encourage them and train them on how to collect evidence and how to contribute that to the system. So if they can take a video, they can take a photo or record something, that'd be great. They're not users. Therefore, I mean, I'm assuming you're talking about a situation where they are not the users. Then I want to remove all the kind of conduits, all the barriers between the company and the actual user. So so evidence, good evidence is one that is coming directly from the user.
Okay. Good.
Great. Shane, I promised you that you're next.
Shane, before you say anything, Shane was on my team, and he was at WeWork and was one of our nuggetizers. So go ahead.
Okay, so you don't get a question. Kidding.
I can ask you a question.
I'd be happy to answer a question. Yeah, so I was probably myself and another contractor were the hard labor it was of building a research repository from scratch, many hours of conducting interviews and transcribing them and tagging them into these different systems that we use to create the repository. It takes time, but it is worth it. And since then, I've used that experience to help guide the work that I've continued to do. So currently I lead research operations for Veteran Affairs, the Office of Chief Technology Officer. And I've built a research repository with the tools that I have available to me. And that tool currently is GitHub. And GitHub is not designed to build a research repository, but I found a way to hack the system to make it work the way that we wanted to, or as close to it as we can. So we can't currently tag on the nugget level. We can tag on the what I call the project level of an issue card and add our insights to that card. So you can still get to the insights. We just can't tag individually on the nugget level itself. But the question I wanted to get for you, Tomer, is, based on my experience with you at WeWork and continued experience with building repositories, is the thing that we're trying to get to that next level is tracking and measuring if the repository is actually being used, if it's useful. How does it drive decision-making and innovation? So my question is, do you have any new guidance or inspiration on how we can make sure that what we're building is actually being used for good use?
So, I mean, you could do that formally and, use, any other tool that people use on products to kind of measure kind of behind the scenes how the thing is being used. I would say that's one option. Two is, I don't know what to call it, kind of anecdotally or in terms of kind of feelings that you have based on what's happening around you. If people come to you, if people ask you questions, if you see that there's, I would call it livelihood around the repository, not just by the group, probably small group of people, researchers who are actually contributing content there, then then these are good signals. If you see that, repository, even in your team, is not being updated, and you're not being asked a lot, and it's not being recognized, in meetings, in all hands, then you probably have a feeling, you can have a feeling that it's not working very well. But it's a product. I mean, it's harder when you use, like yourself and me, when we kind of twist the arms of other tools that were not built for this. It's harder to implement kind of measurements about that. So you can do that by asking people. So, send a brief survey to people who either use it or supposed to use it. But if it's a tool that you're building, then you can implement any kind of tracking for different metrics. And I would say that's for a different talk, but the biggest and most important probably metric is retention, how much people keep using it.
Yeah, and some tools you can actually see, which is a new thing in some of the repository tools, which is a great addition. Cameron, you've been waiting patiently.
Yes, thank you. No, my question is actually, I feel like a good one to come after Shane's, because I'm sort of in a similar position. The organization that I've just joined, I've been here, I think 6 weeks or so, and I come from an organization that had a much more robust research operations, design operations team. And coming on to this team that I'm on now, one of the things that I'm really kind of tasked with is building out this repository. And I've kind of, as I've done my due diligence, asking, and understanding the different teams, the different journeys, kind of what tools they're using and different things like that. The kind of initial conclusion that I've arrived at is that, the folks in this organization need to do a much better job at a foundational level of just tracking the research activities that they're performing. And so, I know Shane mentioned kind of the Scotch tape together solution of GitHub. And the question I asked in the chat is like, to what extent or level have you seen or had any experience with folks using a tool like Rally or a tool like Jira, to do this type of work? And the reason, I kind of ask that question is, all the work is being tracked out of those tools, or should be. And, that's where leadership will often go to ask questions or to look. And so my sort of approach has been to meet people, where they're at in the tools that they're using, rather than trying to iterate, something sort of net new, so that when they're starting work, they've got to record it in one place, but then they've got to, do something with the research repository or whatever off in left field. And so I'm just wondering what your perspective on using those kind of workflow management, Jira, Rally sort of things would be when it comes to doing this type of work.
I'm using it today, so that's an answer. But I think there are pros and cons to each approach. Today there are multiple tools that are dedicated just to that. Were built on the idea of being a research repository, which is great. But sometimes, and two considerations come to mind here. One of them you mentioned, that you don't want to bring to the company yet another tool that people need to learn. And if they are using, GitHub or Jira or Monday or whatever, then it's just another item on the menu there that they need to access with something they're familiar with. And also these tools, as much as they were not designed to become a research repository, in most cases, they have very powerful capabilities that you can kind of maneuver yourself into. And that's going to be harder with something you buy off the shelf. Another one is another reason is a part of the first reason, cheaper. Somebody's already paying for that.
Right.
Instead of, I have no idea how much it costs these days to use a dedicated tool, but it's cheap, being cheap or being kind of saving money being a person that saves money to the company is always going to be
Sure.
appreciated. So that's another consideration.
Great, thank you.
Hey, Robbie Lee.
Yes. Hi. Thank you for the opportunity. And I just want to say, Tomer, I'm very, very excited. Just really quick before my question, I used to, back when I was a student, and I now work as a UX researcher in Boston, but back when I was a student, I used to listen to Steve Portigal's podcast, and you have an excellent episode there. Love it. And so this is awesome for me. But my question is about quality control of interpretation. So it's somewhere between curation and consumption. And one strength of the traditional model, I think, is that researchers, we can do a lot of cross-referencing, we talk to each other, we do synthesis, we can also control the narrative of how you interpret the data. This repository / system that we presented today is great for tracking everything, but maybe talk a little bit about the process that you used. Do you still do share outs? Do you do a completely asynchronous, self-service model, or do you kind of remedy that?
Excellent question. So it doesn't negate anything that happened before this. So yes, we still do share outs. We still share the research the same way we shared it before. It's just now, bring popcorn and watch some videos rather than here's a report we're going to go over. But I think that the challenge for researchers I see is, again, letting others do that work or curate or create. So again, first, I'm very much for kind of democratizing the whole thing, even if it's not perfect. But some balance, the checks and balances that you can put that I mentioned is a review process. So it could be that, an engineer or product manager creates a nugget or a theme or a playlist, but then somebody who's a researcher maybe reviews that and kind of helps make it more valid, organized, whatever there is missing. Anyone is allowed to interpret. So, and you know what? It's going to happen whether we like it or not, whether we have a repository or not. People do that all the time. This is not introducing something special that makes that happen. So I would say, and I know of other people in the field that are completely against kind of unprofessional work being done, but I'm okay with it. I think we should. It happens anyway, and we should not necessarily accept it, but help it become better. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, thank you so much.
And 2 warm points for you from being from Boston.
Hey, I actually want to go back to one of the questions that we had earlier in the chat. David, you had a question about 2 schools of thought around nuggets. Are you still here? Do you want to ask it?
Yeah, I think the question itself probably summed it up pretty good. Basically, it was just the difference. There's kind of 2 schools of thoughts, one Tomer's and another Daniel Pidcock's. And just in terms of how they look about nuggets in this context. And from my understanding, Daniel kind of equates them with what he calls facts in his system. And obviously Tomer equates them more to like key takeaways that roll up into larger insights. Any thoughts on that?
I'm talking with Daniel from time to time. I think any kind of advanced thought about this is going to make this whole repository idea better. So I don't really kind of object to anything there. I think there's another kind of school of thought. I don't know if it's on the same level, but kind of whether this repository should also include what happens after, even going into kind of project management of solving some of the things and managing that. I think it should be clean of that and only include the insights. What happens after that is, belongs to other areas. But yeah, I mean, from my perspective, disassembling what we learned and then reassembling it into new insights based on what others learned from their efforts, or what we see in industry, kind of going back to the articles that we add to themes. I think it's important. I think it's meaningful, and that's what I'm trying to do. So, yeah, that's my take.
Great. So I think we're going to take the last question. So Kevin, you want to ask?
Hi, Kevin.
Hi, good to see you, Tomer. Thank you so much for the session today. I'll keep my question succinct. How could conducting lean user research benefit from repositories?
So lean user research, I would say, is a way to conduct your research in a very non-wasteful way, which I'm always for. So it could mean that usability test is not being done in 3 weeks; it's being done in 3 hours, because there's really one activity that needs to happen, and it doesn't need to take 3 weeks for that. And it also, lean research is also about providing this learning, this insight to your stakeholders, to the right ones, and at the right time. So by the fact that we have a research repository and not having somebody wait for a report or read a lot of reports to find what they're looking for, is a way to encourage that, I believe, because it's open for anybody in the company. Anyone can access that. Anyone can ask any question they're interested in about their customers and find the answer there, again, once there's enough information. So I think they go well together. My kind of little asterisk next to that is that I don't think that usability tests are good methods to include in a repository. Stay warm.
Okay. Well, that was great. Thank you so much, everyone here. Tomer, of course, for you for doing this talk and answering all of these questions, but everyone here for asking these questions, being very involved in the chat and answering others. It was so fun to see all of you participating. And yeah, thank you so much, everyone. Joy.
Thank you, everybody.
And if you missed that,
Yeah.
we'll share the recordings and the presentation by email to everyone who registered.
Great.
Thank you.
All right. Bye-bye.
It was awesome.
Bye.
Thanks, Tomer.
Thank you.
Thank you.